So I have the webinar scheduled for about an hour, though we very well may go under that. I've got, I think, about 30 minutes of information to share with you, and then we've got some time for questions. And of course, you can reach me at any point from my contact information on the California Fish Passage Forum website. So as the name suggests, we're here today to talk about a small but mighty funding opportunity that the California Fish Passage Forum offers every year through the National Fish Habitat Partnership. This is set up as a regular Zoom meeting, so you are welcome to unmute yourself and share your screen or share your video during the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. But until then, especially if you've got background noise, I will just ask that you stay muted just for the presentation that I'm going to give here today. So let's get going. All right, so today we are going to be going over a few things. We're going to be going over the purpose and eligibility of our funding opportunity, examples of past award recipients, the amounts we have available for this next funding cycle, and match requirements, how to apply, the timeline, and then we've got time for question and answer. Before we really get into it, I presume that most folks here are at least somewhat familiar with the California Fish Passage Forum, but I am going to just state kind of who we are. We are one of 20 fish habitat partnerships across the United States under the umbrella of the National Fish Habitat Partnership. So we are a federally supported organization that brings together a lot of the different major players in fish passage in California. So that includes NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as many of our state agencies like state parks, Department of Water Resources, CDFW, State Coastal Conservancy. And then we also engage quite a bit with some of our really wonderful nonprofit partners like California Trout, Trout Unlimited, and we've got a few other partners in the works coming up here soon. And one of the things that we offer is this annual funding opportunity. We've got a few other events and webinars coming up here in the future. This image to the right on the screen here is another funding opportunity that is available from NOAA. NOAA is partnering with the Fish Habitat Partnership Program to offer some additional funding for projects which increase opportunities for recreational fishing. And that's going to be on Wednesday, December 4th. So that is available on the California Fish Passage Forum website under events. And that's going to be a pretty exciting opportunity here that we'll be talking about. After that, we do have a second webinar coming up for this funding opportunity that's going to be much later into the open application process. It's going to be on Tuesday, December 17th, and that is 3 weeks before our application period closes. So if you've been working through an application and you've got questions about how your project might be scored, or questions about something you've encountered while you are working through the application, this could be a good opportunity for you to get those questions answered. That webinar will cover the post-application timeline, the evaluation criteria, and allow lots of time for questions. So I'll get right into it. The mission of the forum is to protect and revitalize anadromous fish populations within our geographic scope, which runs from the upper reaches of the Klamath Basin in Oregon all the way down to the southern border of California. And we're hoping to restore and revitalize those populations by restoring freshwater habitat connectivity throughout the historic range of those species. Some examples of eligible costs for this funding opportunity would be assessments to prioritize and plan barrier removals, removal or remediation or restoration to improve connectivity, monitoring, which is related to a barrier assessment, removal, or remediation, community outreach and education actions, also related to some type of barrier assessment, removal, remediation, or restoration project, land acquisitions or easements, projects that assess the effectiveness of restoration techniques, and research on fish passage of our priority species. So through funding projects included in this bullet point and more, we're hoping that we can help advance the forum's mission and advance the health and resiliency of our anadromous fish populations overall. Those priority species do include our salmonid, our really well publicized anadromous fish here in California. That includes the coho and chinook, as well as steelhead, Pacific lamprey, coastal cutthroat trout, green and white sturgeon, Hulicon, and three-spine stickleback are all priority species listed on the forum strategic plan. The funding can be used for all phases of a project, from feasibility, planning, capacity building, all the way from implementation to post-construction monitoring. So this doesn't have to be, this funding doesn't just have to be for a project that is in its initial planning purposes. If you have a project and you're looking for some post-construction monitoring funding, this could be a good opportunity for that. Proposals definitely should indicate which part of the project that will utilize forum funding, and you can do that through including it in your project budget, the template for which I will go over here in a little bit. So while we do fund just about everything, we do have some ineligible costs. Those include pre-award costs, incentive payments, operation and maintenance of specifically buildings and structures, not necessarily maintenance or construction of earthen structures. So you're welcome to use this funding to help maintain your earthen structures, just not building and facility maintenance. Actions that we also wouldn't fund actions required by existing regulatory programs like mitigation projects, except for funds that could support except funds may support activities under voluntary agreements that exceed regulatory requirements. For example, hydropower licensing, in which the licensee enters into a voluntary agreement to restore habitat that exceeds regulatory requirements. And those are all listed on the RFP instructions, which I will include in the chat. For anybody interested in examples of projects we've funded in the past, these are all available on the California Fish Passage Forum website. We've supported about 60 projects over the years, and that includes everything from manual remediation of barriers, big barrier removals or replacements with bridges, off-channel connectivity and habitat enhancement. You can go and click on any of these on the website and it'll take you through some more details. This right here is a Trout Unlimited project on the Noyo River that had a beautiful bottomless culvert. Additionally, all of those projects are also displayed in a map-based format on the forum website under projects and project map. So you can go and click around, see where these supported projects have been, and also learn about the details of each project through there. I can give you a good feeling for the variety of projects that we've funded through this opportunity in the past. So let's get to some of the good details. Like I said, this is a small but meaningful funding program. We get around 300 to 350,000 yearly, and that is the total package that comes to us through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Fish Habitat Partnership. So in order to support a diverse range of projects, we do like to break this out. So we generally prioritize projects that request up to 100K, and that allows us to up the diversity of projects we fund each year. So for example, we tend to have a range of projects that request anywhere from 40 or 50K up to 100K. So obviously this isn't enough of an amount generally fully fund a project unless it's a very small scope outreach or capacity building project, which are still eligible, of course. But what our practitioners and applicants generally end up doing is using us as a supplement for other funding that they have for their projects, because we can cover some hard to fund items like monitoring, assessment, equipment, capacity building, or other activities. So we can be a part of your cost share package. We do have a match requirement that we have to fulfill, and that is from our funding legislature. Funding law that grants us our funding is the America's Conservation Enhancement Act. And that requires that all of the NIFHAP funded projects demonstrate a one-to-one non-federal match. Matching funds can be in the form of cash or in-kind support, and that must be from non-federal sources and spent during the project period. However, match does not need to be secured before the application is submitted. It should be outlined as anticipated or expected in the project budget. If you're having trouble securing your match, definitely you're also welcome to let us know, and we can help look at some state or other non-federal funding options, which we are aware of that might be able to help you make that match requirement. You're also welcome to apply if you don't have a full one-to-one non-federal match. Your project will just score more positively if you have one-to-one or over. Though we do welcome applications. If you're almost there but not quite there, don't let it prevent you from submitting. Matching funds requirements are waived for projects which are led by or proposed by tribal sponsors. So if you're working with a tribal partnership, or you yourself are representing the Fish Passage Program or Fisheries or Habitat Program from a tribe, this match requirement will be waived for you. So this does not mean that funds that you working with a tribal partner means that you don't have to meet the match requirement. It just means that if the tribe was the applicant, so that can be a good way to get around that match requirement if you're working with a tribal entity and they are able to submit the application. How to apply, it's very straightforward. So we do have the instructions available at the forum website. That's cafishpassageforum.org/forum-funding. And that outlines some of the things I've talked about today, like the eligibility, award amounts, match requirements, all of that good stuff. You're also welcome to contact me. My contact information is at the footer of the website on every page, and it's also, I'll put it in the chat. And my email is just hsteindorf@nrccorp.com. And you can reach out to me with any application questions. There are 3 different templates that we provide to you to help structure your application. This includes a template for your budget, for any metrics that you're expecting to generate from your project, such as miles of habitat opened, barriers removed, people reached through outreach, etc., as well as an example of your project timeline. And I'll go through each of these here on the next few slides. After you've got all of those things together for your project, you will submit them through our online application, which is housed on JotForm. Most applicants I've found generally have pretty much all the needed materials in order to apply. It's just a matter of gathering them, bundling them together. So by the time you're ready to do that JotForm application doesn't really take too long, but it does require you to, have at the ready things like a brief description of your project, an example of the ecological or social benefits of your project. We also really appreciate getting some pre-project images. So if you've got high quality images of the project site, that can be really helpful when we're putting together a really beautiful before and afters of, say, a culvert or a bridge remediation. So those three templates look a little bit like this. The budget template, which is Appendix A, has you put down what funding you are getting from each of your contributing funding agencies and what you're expecting those funds to go to. Things like salary and wages, benefits, supplies, construction, equipment, any of those things. If you've got any questions about these, you're welcome to reach out to me. Appendix B, which is project metrics, has you just put in a numerical value for things like habitat installations, increase of flow, decrease of flow, number of designs developed, number of research studies conducted. And this just allows us to get a really good quantitative snapshot of the results of your project, which is helpful for reporting and would probably be helpful for you when you're also talking about the results of your project. And this, you just put in whatever is relevant to your project. You're certainly not obligated to fill out everything, because we know each project leads to different outcomes. Appendix C, which is the project timeline, and here the text in here is just an example, would show the period over which you're expecting to administer your project. So that could include pre-project planning, assessments, that could include pre-project monitoring, as well as the development of engineering designs, construction, and post-construction monitoring or outreach. So it gives you the opportunity to input your estimated schedule, milestones, and a description of tasks. So filling out those three timelines and attaching them to your application is a great, gives us all the information that we need to properly evaluate your project. The timeline for this is relatively straightforward. Unfortunately, the NIFHAP funding opportunity does come with a bit of a built-in delay, and that's because the funding for each of these projects has to be federally appropriated, and that takes some time. So the reason that this is titled the FY26 funding opportunity is because you would apply this winter for funds that will be available to you if selected for funding in the spring or early summer of fiscal year 2026. So keep that in mind. This would be a little bit of a long-range funding opportunity, which can be very helpful for projects which take some years to get going. So if you think you're going to be ready to get money in 2026, this is a good opportunity for you. The deadline is on Friday, February 7th, 2025, and that's when your proposals, including those three fillable spreadsheets and your application are due on Jotform. In February, I assemble and we evaluate the proposals using a group of independent experts, fish passage experts from around the state, put together from our forum membership. In March of 2025, we would submit those ranked projects to Congress through the National Fish Habitat Partnership. Congress generally notifies us of the recipient of the receipt. They notify us that they've received our ranked projects and approve them generally in summer 2025. And we send out an announcement of who is getting funded a particular year in winter or spring of 2026. And summer 2026 is when that funding is available. This timeline can wiggle around a little bit, but that's how it has been for pretty much the length of the NIFHAP program. So I'm not expecting that to change too much. And if you've ever got questions about where your application is at in the process, you're welcome to send those questions to me. Just a few more pieces of information before we move to question and answer. All of that information, such as the metrics from your project, the benefits of your project, location, of course, and the nature of your project, goes not only onto the forum website, but it does go onto a public-facing dashboard that is put together by the National Fish Habitat Partnership, showing all of the different restoration projects which have been funded by the partnerships in since 2012 when NIFHAP was funded. Or actually maybe even a little earlier. So for example, here you can go and, That video is pretty short. Let me play that again. So across the United States and Hawaii, all of these blue dots are completed projects, green are active projects, and in California, we've got a number of projects here. So if you're ever interested, I will go ahead and post the link to that in the chat in a little bit when we're doing question and answer. For project practitioners, another resource I would like to take a moment to direct you to is a really excellent resources website. If you're not familiar with the Accelerating Restoration Project developed by Sustainable Conservation, this can be very helpful as you are navigating the complicated world of project permitting. So this resource website aims to help California restoration practitioners find and understand how to use efficient permitting pathways for their aquatic and riparian habitat restoration projects. And that's just at acceleratingrestoration.org. You can find permitting pathways by agency. They've got a really great introduction to permitting report, as well as lots of different information about what you need to apply for those permits, what types of projects are eligible, how those accelerated permitting pathways can save you a lot of time and money as you're developing your projects. They include information about legislation and laws that define these permitting pathways, as well as tips for each permitting agency to give you the greatest chance of success. So if you haven't looked into accelerating restoration or sustainable conservation yet, I would recommend looking into that as you're moving your projects forward. Question from John in the chat, a link to the full presentation. Yes, I will send out the presentation recording. It'll be available on the website, and I will also send it to each of you individually so that you can share it with your colleagues. All right, that is actually everything that I had. Like I said, we are definitely a little early, which is good. I can get you guys back to your Tuesday a little sooner. So I'm gonna actually stop sharing my screen. I'll go through and put some of these links here in the chat, and then we're just gonna open it up to questions. Like I said, this is set up like a regular Zoom meeting. So unlike an official webinar, you do have the option to ask your question verbally. You also have the option to turn on your camera if you would like to chat that way. You can also ask questions in the chat. So thank you all, and I look forward to your questions. Question from Ethan, can the applicant submit multiple proposals? Yes. Yes, you have no limit to the amount of proposals you can submit through the opportunity. We have definitely funded several from the same applicant organization in the past, and you're welcome to do that as well. Question about if this is a federal fund or a state fund. That's a great question. Ultimately, our funding does come from the National Fish Habitat. We're granted that through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that comes from the federal budget. So ultimately, it is a federal fund. Another question from Ethan, can a single proposal cover assessment of multiple fish passage issues on various creeks and watersheds? Absolutely. So yeah, Ethan, that we certainly could fund assessments in multiple watersheds. You would just have to demonstrate your plan, especially if you are assessing kind of a larger area. You would just have to justify that you are doing that effectively, utilizing science-based and evidence-based protocol, and demonstrate how the forum funds would be used to support your assessment. But assessments aren't limited to a particular area. It's really about where those needs are for your organization and for our target species, of course. Question from Rachel, are implementation proposals more likely to secure funding than assessment or monitoring proposals? Historically, Rachel, direct removals have scored more highly than assessment or monitoring proposals, but the forum has really recognized kind of an unmet need in the statewide fish passage environment that sometimes assessment and monitoring is really it's this kind of a statewide unmet need. So I think we're aiming to score those a little bit more evenly with each other. Question from Ethan: how confident are you that this funding will be appropriated? That's a good question. You know, that requires me to put on my crystal ball and look into the future, which I certainly haven't figured out how to do. I would say that we've seen over the, more than a decade of the NIFHAP program, really strong bipartisan support for projects that enhance opportunities for recreation and improve landscape health. And the NIFHAP program has not only remained funded, it has grown over the last 10 years. And for anybody who is interested, our funding opportunity is just one of 20 from the different fish habitat partnerships around the state. For example, if you have a project that is working more in an estuary or tidally influenced environment, PMEP, which is the Pacific Marine and Estuary Partnership, also has their funding opportunity. There's also some money specifically for Pacific lamprey from the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative. And all of us kind of work together to elevate this suite of projects across the Pacific seaboard. From Ethan: do fish passage barriers upstream of other barriers to anadromy qualify? They do qualify. We wouldn't necessarily disqualify an application of that nature. It really depends on the circumstances of the area. I would say if there is like a major and complete barrier to passage downstream of your project site and there is no other way for anadromous fish to utilize the habitats that you're hoping to restore, protect, or remediate passage to, that might score lower just in terms of the overall impact of the project when it's completed. However, we definitely have funded projects in the past which are improving spawning habitat downstream of major barriers where adult relocations occur, or there are other ways that target species can utilize those habitats. Or, if this is one project in a suite of planned removals, and it is more feasible for your organization to do some of those upstream removals first, that's a very compelling reason to fund those upstream removals, knowing that that downstream barrier is at some point going to be removed. So there's a lot of different specific information about your project site, which we take into account when we are evaluating it for funding. Great question. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to stay on the meeting just in case anybody wanted to stay longer with me and ask me questions individually. You're welcome to do that. But if you need to leave to go have other endeavors, feel free to go and do that. And do take a look at those application materials on the links I provided at forum funding at the forum website. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. And I hope to see some applications flowing in early February.